and I know a lot of you here are obviously F&B professionals, so this is very applicable to what you do, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here to actually share a little bit more about this national drink called Shochu. Okay? This initiative is brought to you by the Japan Sake and Shochu Association. Just give me a moment. Is it recording? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so the JSS, or the Japan Sake and Shochu Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association, why is it not moving? Okay, just a quick introduction of them. They are part of a government organization that is non-profit, and their sole purpose is to bring sake and shochu to the masses. So it's about advocacy. They've recently also just tied up a partnership with ASI, with the International Sommelier Associations to include some elements of sake as well as shochu into things like the competition. So on our part, or at least on my part, I represent, so I didn't move my slide, but I represent the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association as the Southeast Asian representative. So my sole purpose is to try and promote sake within this region. So like myself, there are other JSS representatives that actually help with the advocacy in other parts, say in Europe or even in America. And I actually literally just came back from Bali promoting sake in Bali. Okay? Hopefully we get a chance to do for Shochu. But again, today is not about me. Today is about Shochu. Now, just a quick show of hands. How many of you drink Shochu maybe once a week? Oh, awesome. All from Japanese restaurants, right? Okay, more or less. How about once a month? Anybody? So it's still the same tree? Okay. How about once every 6 months? Once every 6 months, okay. We need to drink more often together. So as you can tell, Shochu's reach, or I would say popularity, is still in the works, okay? But when it comes to statistics, actually Shochu and Japanese sake, the consumption in Japan is about half and half. So you actually have equal amount of people drinking shochu as compared to Nihonshu, which is Japanese sake. Okay? And I guess because of that reason, because most of you here are not too familiar about what shochu truly is, so I'm just going to share a little bit more about what shochu is, as well as production. I think you kind of need to know how is it being produced first to appreciate how the flavors are. Okay? Afterwards, actually midway through, I do have a special guest as well as a speaker, and she'll introduce herself, obviously, and she'll be doing a bit of tasting with all of you. Okay, so there are a couple of segments that's being spread out throughout these 2 hours. But first, we're going to talk about shochu production. Okay? Now, when we talk about production, now shochu is a spirit. Okay? And when we talk about spirits, it's very different from, say, a fermented product. What do I mean by that is because when we look at spirits, we need to look at a 4-step making process. So what you have at the beginning, raw material, all the way to a final product, which is spirit. Now that 4-step process usually takes you from processing of the raw materials, okay? And then fermentation. So you're gonna need to convert some form of energy source into alcohol. And then finally, not finally, you still have distillation as well as post-distillation operations. Okay? Now, I will take you through that step by step. But first, let's look at the ingredients. Now, the ingredients of shochu making, it's for those who are trained in sake. How many of you here are familiar with sake? I know I see a couple of faces. All right, some of you are highly qualified in sake. Now, that production process is kind of similar in a vein because there's one ingredient that is very important to sake making, which is called koji. Yes, exactly, koji. So you see the initial equation you have there, things like water, which is what is used in sake, right? And then you have koji, which is the mole, okay? And then you see these other 2 animations, rice as well as barley, right? Barley. Now, those two are typically used for koji making. So unlike for sake, whereby we usually use rice as a base, there is an option for you to use barley as a base for koji making, right? And then lastly, you have another one, which is your base ingredients. That is your showcase. So for example, okay, if you are making a imo shochu, which is a sweet potato shochu, then your core would be sweet potato. But your koji, you can use either or, an option, okay? Yeah, so hence, there are many types of base ingredients that you can use. And in truth, and I have to admit this, it's a bit of a disclaimer, I'm not familiar with all the ingredients that are at our disposal for making shochu, because there are over about 50 varieties of shochu, raw ingredients that you can use to make shochu. However, there are a couple of mainstream ones that you tend to find, especially if you go into the supermarket, if you go to a bar. Half the time, you will be able to find these common type of shochu, I suppose. Yeah. So, for example, sweet potato, which is imo, right? For those who have tasted imo shochus, anybody? What was the feeling that you had when you had imo shochu? What does it remind you of? Or does it remind you of anything? Sweet potatoes, really? Okay. Krish, yeah? You can take the potato flavors.
Because for me, I like the black koji stuff.
Okay.
So the aroma is also very good.
Yep.
So,
okay, so nice aromas.
End of the finishing will be mostly the potato flavors.
Okay, mostly potato flavors. Okay.
More floral.
More floral. Okay, to you it's more floral. Okay, great. Dino, your thoughts?
My thought is very perfumed.
Very perfumed. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to imo shochu, it's one of those quite heavily perfumed, to an extent even pungent or even pronounced in terms of aroma, because they are quite strong. Yeah, it is one of the more stronger and more intense shochu types that you can find, right? Barley. How about barley? Has anybody had barley shochu before? Yesterday, wow. Okay, for you it's yesterday. Your feeling, okay.
Acid potato usually tends to, I don't know, it feels a bit flatter.
Flatter, okay. Flatter sounds like a dirty word, but I think what Patrick here is referring to is that it's not as pronounced in terms of aroma, right? I tend to think that when I smell barley shochu, right, mugi, it tends to remind me of a new make from Scotch whiskey. That means before it goes into a barrel, right? There is a significant amount of cereal character, even down to things like toasted rice or toasted rice cakes, that kind of aromas. Okay, good. What about rice? Kome shochu. Anyone? Rice shochu, yeah. Yes? Yeah, of course, please.
More delicate, fresher, floral in character.
Yeah.
Lighter on palate as well. A little bit reminiscent of sake, so
Yeah.
fresher and cleaner.
Absolutely. I think that is a very good description of what a rice shochu would be. So it's a much lighter, sometimes crisp, even to the extent of fruity. Okay, good. How about brown sugar? Anybody had a kokuto shochu recently? No? Anybody likes rum? Rum. Oh, all the closet rum lovers. Yeah, well, rum is a sugar-based spirit, so kokuto shochu tends to be very similar in that vein. Yeah, so you can expect certain flavors, certain aroma type can be quite close to brown sugar or kokuto shochu, right, for rum. Anybody had buckwheat before? I'm sure all of you had buckwheat at least, not the shochu, buckwheat, which is soba, right, south soba. So that's one example. I must say this is probably one of the least known ones that tends to be available in the market. But today we will have a buckwheat shochu for you to try. Okay, and you will be able to try it in different forms, not just via the tasting, but also in the form of cocktail, right? As well as different techniques to drink it with water. Right. Now that's the raw materials. Now as we move into continuing that process of processing, right, we need to understand the making of koji. Now, the type of koji that is in existence for shochu making, I'd say, it's very different from sake making. Because sake making, the focus there, or the most commonly used one actually is, if I'll start you from the bottom actually, is yellow koji. Okay? That's the one that tends to be widely used. Now, black and white tends to be used for shochu making, with black koji being almost the absolute for our mori. Okay? And that's also one of the reasons why, in terms of flavor, in terms of texture, in terms of profile of what that spirit is, it's all down to black koji. Okay? Now, but why is that the case? I think people need to understand why is that the case. When you drink sake or nihonshu, what's the feeling that you get in terms of texture, maybe even flavor profile? Does it feel high in acid, or does it feel pungent in flavors? What do you think when you're drinking sake, only sake? What do you think? Anybody has an impression? I'm sure all of you. How many of you don't drink sake here? I'll be very surprised. All of you drank sake before, right? Yes, to a certain extent. Yeah. How when you taste sake, how is the difference between, or maybe in terms of structural components? Let me be more specific. How about acidity when you drink sake? Do you feel it's acidic at all?
It depends on the sake.
Good. That's a very good answer. Let's just say normal, non-Yamahai, non-Kimoto style, just normal, generic Inyo sake.
I mean, those kind of light texture sake, I don't find the acidity that much.
Yep.
There's a little tinge of it.
Yeah, very good.
But if we go for those traditional glass, like shushu, this kind of stuff, right? The acidity is more pronounced in that kind of stuff.
You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So when we talk about sake in general, let's say in general, the acidity tends to be much lower. Now, what white koji and black koji has to offer is at a much higher acidity level. Okay, much higher acidity level. Even the type of acid that you have is different. So sake, for yellow koji side, you get things like more like succinic acid, okay, which is a lot softer. The acidity that you get from white and black actually is more citric. So at times, if you use black and white koji for sake making, right, there's a distinctive citrus note that you can smell from the sake, even. Yeah. But again, the question burns down to why does shochu require that kind of, why has it been this case? Can't you use yellow koji, you know? So the quick answer is, the short answer is, yes, you can. But based on tradition, based on history, based on location, if you look at the map of Japan, which I don't have it right now with me, but if you think about it, most production for shochu is isolated. Is it far up north or is it far up, down south? Correct, exactly. It's in the south. So when we talk about the south, we're talking about places like Kagoshima, right, in Kyushu region, which is a lot hotter, right? It's a lot hotter. Now, when you're a lot hotter in a much humid climate condition, obviously, there's a lot of room for growth of what? Of bacteria, okay, of microorganisms. Now, because of that reason, when you're producing a certain product, you need to protect that product. And the only way to protect that product is with something that's of a higher, more acidic environment, I'd say. So this is also one of the reasons why white and black tends to be used for shochu making, because it's isolated at the bottom. Whereas up north, when we're talking about places like in the Tohoku region, Hokkaido, whereby it's much, much colder, spoilage is a lot lesser, right? You have a slight luxury not to use black or white. Yeah. So yes, so that's on koji, okay? That's on koji. Then we look at how do you actually inoculate koji, right? The mold. So when we talk about inoculation, it's fairly similar to making a sake. Fairly similar. We're talking about how do we make koji making? I'm going to tap onto your expertise. How do you make koji? Anyone? I'm already looking at Patrick because our different master, yes.
So after the rice is steamed, you sprinkle like a koji mold on the rice so that you can start to like produce like the spores.
Yep. So the spores would infect the rice. Yeah, you're right. Right? Yeah, exactly. So you're absolutely right. So it produces a form of enzymes, isn't it? Yes. So for this instance, it's kind of similar. Now, if you're using a rice koji, so there will be a certain degree of polishing, right? Typically, for shochu making, the polishing is not like how we do for sake making, whereby we polish it to a very, very small amount. No, you usually polish, you costly polish it, right? It can be up to maybe 90 or 80% of rice that's left behind, okay? Because all you need, technically, is just the germ and the endosperm, part of the endosperm to be removed. So that's what's happening. Now, if you use barley to make it, to make the koji, it's kind of the same thing. You will still do a certain degree of polishing, okay? And then you inoculate it. So same system, okay? So same day in the office, but a different agenda. So when we talk about growth, right, and control of the koji, it's still a 2-day process. Okay, it's still a 2-day process, approximately about 48 hours. Some people will tell you it's slightly longer, depending on what kind of shochu they're making. And then we look at making the moromi, and I think this is where the similarities almost stop for shochu and sake making. Because for those who are familiar with sake making, when you make sake, right, after the koji, what's that process called? Starts with an S. Yes, good. Sandan jikomi, exactly. Sandan jikomi. So a 3-step additional process, right? Now, what they're trying to do there with the 3-step addition process is to allow an opportunity, a window for yeast to propagate, to grow into a strong enough army to take over the entire batch of fermentation. Now, in this instant, however, it's different. Okay? They don't do sandan jikomi. Well, they probably do one, which is one addition, because they will make a preliminary batch, which is kind of like your fermentation starter, your yeast starter, okay? But as you know, yeast starters these days, they can take all the way, for sakes especially, it will take a much longer period of time, right? Up to about 14 days. This takes to about 6 to 8 days, maybe. And then after that, you add in your main bulk of ingredients. After steaming, cooking it, crushing it, you put it into your main bulk, and then you have basically your main fermentation, okay? So the need for a sandan jikomi is actually not required. There are multiple reasons. One particular reason would be also because of acidity. Much higher, it's a much conducive environment for your yeast population to grow instantly, okay? So that's making the muromi, the fermentation mash. So step 1, processing, check. Step 2, fermentation, check. Now we go into step 3, which is distillation. Now the process of distillation is a process, by definition, to separate water and alcohol. That is its main objective, yes? But in addition to that objective, I won't say secondary objective, it's a by-the-way thing. They help to concentrate aromas. So if you are producing in the fermentation aromas of things like fruits, that fruit aroma is being heightened, is being concentrated during distillation, okay? So this distillation process is a fairly important process. Now, but how do you actually attain that? You go through a still, right? You go through a still. Now, when we talk about stills, there are similarities to the other spirits. So in the spirits world, you have things like the pot still distillation as well as column still distillation. And anybody here familiar with spirits? Anybody drink spirits on a regular basis? Who likes scotch? Scotch whiskey. Some, yes. I know some of you like scotch whiskey. What will a single malt scotch be? How does a single malt scotch being attained? Which kind of stills would you use? Would it be a pot or a column still? Anyone? No? Now, the pot still, which is the one on the left, now that is a classic still that is used for spirits like Scotch. Okay, like Scotch. Now the only difference here between a pot still in Honkaku Shochu making versus a Scotch whiskey making is that the material is different. In Scotch, you use copper. Here, you use stainless steel. Okay, here you use stainless steel. So it's a little bit different. But by definition, if you are going to make a Honkaku Shochu, Honkaku being authentic, traditional, Japanese-made shochu, it must go through a pot still. Okay, it must go through a pot still. Such a spirit, not just called Honkaku Shochu, it's also called a Utsuri. You see in Mandarin, Yilei, right? But that's actually the, it's part of a category. So it's two-part category because the other category belongs to the column still portion, right? Which is kore, kore. Yeah. Now, column still distillation is a process that was initially patented by an Irishman called Nias Coffey. Now, when he created that column still, his intention wasn't exactly to promote alcohol. When he did that, his intention was to refine. So things like in our everyday life, refining sugar, for example, right? Refining crude oil. And obviously to refine alcohol, to rectify it, to clean it up. So even cleaning up of water, distilling water is a huge part. So column still distillation, which is an industry-wide process, is very important for our everyday life. But when it comes to making of alcohol, the types of alcohol that we're talking about for shochu, it's more entry level, I'd say, more entry level. So not the sort that when you drink, you feel that it's very characterful. This is probably the closest thing that you have to Korean shochu. Okay? Korean shochu, most of it uses this technique, not the pot still. Okay, not the pot still. Right. Now, when we talk about the materials still, as you can tell, in the past, obviously, there might have been changes on and off. Stainless steel is usually used. Okay? The reason is also because you don't want to impart too much of flavor. Steel is also a very good heat conductor. Okay? It's also a very good heat conductor. So this has always been used. You might even see in terms of the still design. If you ever get a chance to see the still design of a shochu still, they tend to look a little bit ribbed, as in not ribbed like body, but there are grooves in between. Okay, and it's a very unique design, only to shochu making. Okay, and moving on, still on distillation. Now this is also another concept that is quite unique to shochu. But in truth, other parts of the world do use this technique. It's just that it's not widely documented. This technique, or I would say this variation of atmospheric and vacuum distillation, is widely applied to shochu making. So when we talk about earlier on, I think somebody was telling me about emo shochu that is being very pungent and full, right? If I recall, I think Karen. Because Karen was part of our study group that went to Japan for about 5 days, right? Do you recall having one of was it Dayami? Do you recall? Not Diamond, the shochu that we had, the very last one that you liked.
Dayami, yes.
Yes.
Yes, the black one with the gold.
Yeah, that one I think it's a emo shochu.
Yes.
Yes, that one was an emo shochu, yeah. So I believe in terms of still usage, it's probably a different still. Or it could be the same still, but in terms of pressure difference, that could have been a reduced pressure or vacuum distillation. Now, what do I actually mean by it when I say vacuum and atmospheric? When you use an atmospheric pressure still, you are distilling at basically just room conditions. There is no difference. You're going to boil the liquid to up to a certain percentage, like 85 to 95, right? not to 100 because you don't want to evaporate your water, right? You don't want to vaporize your water. You only want to vaporize the alcohol. Now what happens is that the resultant liquid or the resultant spirit tends to be very heavy, full, very robust. And this is what an atmospheric still will give you. However, if you use a vacuum distillation, now in a vacuum, what happens is that your boiling point cuts by almost half. So you actually take lesser temperature to be able to evaporate or vaporize your liquid. Now what happens or what results is that you tend to get a lighter spirit, something that is much more faint, not as pungent. So I believe, and that brand that we were talking about, and I was quite surprised because when I smelled that shochu, I thought it was, it's, the first thing that hit me was like Gewürztraminer from Alsace, because that was the distinct lychee and pineapple note that I got. Yeah. And then when they told me it was emo shochu, I was like, what?
I had this, last week I was having a Zoom call in Kagoshima Prefecture.
Yep.
So this super pronounced lychee aroma in it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And the shochu name is Dayami.
Yes, exactly. And Daimi actually is not I think it's quite a big brand per se.
So I was having a Zoom meeting, then I asked him, how come when I tasted there's no lychee or something, but the aromas of lychee.
It's very, very strong, right? Yeah.
Then he was telling me like, I think he don't understand my question or what. He just telling me because I use black coach.
Okay. I'm sure koji will have played a part, but for such delicate flavors and compared to another emo, whereby what you expect is usually quite smoky, very pungent aroma, that to me was like it was a very aromatic wine I got. So I personally think most likely this would have been the case. A reduced pressure, right? You tend to focus more on the floral, more fruity aromas, so that would be a vacuum distillation. Okay? Now, also another thing about distillation. In shochu making, distillation is only a one-step process, quite unique, because most of the other more popular spirits that you find in the market that uses a pot still distillation usually goes through a double pot still distillation. So things like Scotch whiskey, rum, right? They always give you a much higher ABV. For this instance, no. Your alcohol percentage will be somewhere about, after your first distillation, somewhere about 30, 40%. And then it's further watered down, depending on the producer, further watered down and bottled and then packaged. Yeah? So it's a much lighter spirit, much more delicate. But yeah, so that's kind of on distillation. So far all good, right? Okay, great. I'm sure all of you are thirsty, so I'm going to not speed run this, but at least get the concepts right, and then I'll have my other co-speaker give her opinion. Now, when we talk of maturation, which is part of both post-distillation or even part of post-making for any kind of alcoholic beverage, maturation, however, is not that commonly done for spirits making. However, you do have this particular shochu type. Well, in essence, it's not considered a shochu. Okay, it's a standalone category called awamori. Okay, awamori. Now, awamori has a class. I would say it's a second separate class that does aging, called kusu. Okay, kusu. Now, the technique that they employ is called shitsugi, which you can see on screen. So, if you're drinking here, so say if maybe you're here, right? You're drinking, right? You realize that my volume is getting lesser and lesser. I need to top it up. So what you do is that you top up from the oldest liquor that you have inside in your storage. You top it up, but then you realize, oh wait a minute, now this one is missing a batch. And then you go to the next one, the second oldest, and top it up. So this process keeps repeating itself to the point whereby you get somewhere that's your fairly new new aomori, and you top it up again. Now, this process for the people well, most of you are sommeliers here, so you would know, or you might remember, something akin to sherry making. What's that process called? Very good. It's the Solera system, isn't it? So it's very similar to the Solera system, except not quite, because in the Solera system, you have multiple barrels going into one another, right? Everything seems to be more evened out. For this instance, however, it's a lot more singular, I'd say. A lot more singular. Now, this is also how that complexity in kusu, which is in its kanji. For those who are, okay, all of you are sake drinkers, so you know, koshu, right? So rather than pronouncing it as koshu, you pronounce it as kusu. So it's just basically a dialect, okay? Yeah, so it has to be at least, to be called kusu, must be at least 3 years and above. So that the youngest spirit that's inside it is actually 3 years and above. And I can tell you, it is freaking amazing. In terms of complexity and flavors, some people always feel that, it's something so would it be very funky? I actually think it's very, very complex. Yep. You get a lot of things like umami, shiitake mushroom, a lot of earthiness from such a drink. Okay? So this is more applicable to awamori, not to shochu. Although it is not, I won't say it's an absolute that you will not find any shochu that is aged. You will find some shochus that are aged. So it depends on the producer at the end of the day. And finally, when we talk about step 4, post-distillation, we are talking about what can you do? What else can you do? Since maturation is an option, we could also dilute it. Okay, dilution is an important part. Some people would like to see it as, if I dilute more, I have more to sell. Well, economically that makes sense, but most of the time as a producer, when you're trying to showcase a certain product, the whole point about it is actually to make something that's a lot easier to drink, more palatable. So having some form of dilution usually helps, okay? But before dilution, I kind of missed out one other point, which is filtration. Now, filtration that tends to happen to remove harshness in the flavor, in the spirit. So think about vodka, for example. This is a process that's very, very akin to vodka. In vodka making, sometimes, if you ever get a chance to go for a vodka masterclass, depending on who the producer is, they would say that our vodka has about 6 different filters. Then if you go to another masterclass, then they'll tell you, but our vodka has 20 filters, you know. So it's a bit of a competition of whose filter, you know, is the most. Filtration basically just helps to remove unwanted and harsh flavor compounds. It doesn't make the spirit too sharp, right? And this sensation can be best felt, especially if you drink a white, for example, a white rum. And I don't want to mention any brands. So white rums, I think vodkas are still okay because white rums, they tend not to use too much of filter compared to a vodka. So that is something that you probably can experience on your own. Okay? Right, so that's on adjustment, that's on bottling. So enough of me talking, let's talk about shochu tasting. Now, today we have actually a very special guest, my co-speaker, who is from the very famous Kurara in Tangling. Okay, so what she's going to do is that she's going to take you through some shochu tasting as well as give you a brief idea on things like GI, okay, and certain shochu types. So can you please put your hands together to help me welcome Miss Olivia Shea. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. I'm going to let her introduce herself. This is there is no pointer, so you've got to just press left, right only. So there's no laser pointer. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I hope I can work this one. Hi, still afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Olivia. Well, actually, it's almost all new faces to me this time, which is interesting. So yes, I work for Kurara, which is a Japanese specialty store in Tanglin. Not sure if any of you have visited us before. And we specialize in Japanese sake, sochu, and Japanese crafts. So aside from sake, which I do, I'm also one of 2 certified Shochu advisors in Singapore, certified by the Sake School of America, endorsed by the Sake Service Institute in Japan. My other colleague out there who's helping me with my, he's waving, helping with the survey is also the other Shochu advisors. Oh, they found a photo of me. Okay, yeah. So I've been dabbling in sake for a long, long time, giving away my age, but it was actually about 6-7 years ago that I started to go into Shochu because of how interesting it was. And ever since then, I've been dealing with Shochu. Aside from sake, usually on my work table, I have at least 1 bottle of Shochu. So in any time, I'll be drinking it. Okay, so we're gonna start. I'm not gonna talk too much about myself. You can ask me a little later if you want, if you're interested. If not, don't worry. Basically, I'm a jiugui. Okay. All right. So Sean said that I'm gonna take you through a little bit about GI. All of you familiar with GIs? Not the Shochu GI, but just GI in general. Yeah, geographic indications. For Shochu, we've got 2, 4, 6. 6 GIs that it's quite obvious. We have got the, sorry, not 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, right? Sorry, sometimes I can't count. 6, yes. So actually in Japan, alcohol, Shochu was the first to apply for GI, not sake. Okay. So we've got Iki, which is barley, from, and then Kuma, rice, Satsuma, sweet potato, and then we also have Ryukyu and Kokuto. So what happens is it means that this particular Shochu is made in that prefecture. Some of them have specific requirements in how it's made or where the ingredients are from. Some don't. Okay, GI is a little iffy in that sense. So we're not going to go, I'm not going to go too much into that, but of the sake, sorry, not sake, Shochus that we're tasting today, we do have the Iki, the Kuma, the Satsuma. All right? So you've been listening for a while? Let's start drinking. Okay, so the first one, oh, it's out. Okay, the first one is Satsuma Shochu. It is a sweet potato Shochu, sweet potato, imo. So there are many different types of sweet potato that can be used in Shochu making. Some of them, unfortunately, we've lost them to pest and all. In fact, last year was one of the sweet potatoes last year was the last crop ever. Yeah. So sometimes they do indicate what sweet potato is being used, and sometimes they don't. For making sweet potato Shochu, most of the time they would use rice koji because it's the easiest to make. Yeah, but it is also possible to make sweet potato koji. It is harder because you have to dry it, then steam it, then inoculate the koji. It takes a lot more effort. But when we use imo koji, the flavors are usually more intense, the sweet potato flavors. Okay, so I'm sure Sean has already said, Shochu, character of Shochu always comes from the base ingredient, more often than not. The other things that would affect, I'm sure you have said also, I wasn't a very good girl listening outside. So I'm like, I think so. I hope you said that. But atmospheric pressure and koji also affects the flavor and aroma of the Shochu. So usually when we do a selection for Shochu, that's 3 things that we look out for. Base ingredient is the first clue. Second, the pressure. Third, the koji. It tells us a lot about the taste. I'll take you through each one. All of them are diluted for you already. We're not tasting them neat today, okay? So why? Because Shochu in general is drunk diluted. Standard dilution percentage, 60-40. 60% dilution. So water, ice, your mixer, 40% sochu. I, on the other way, do the other way around. I put more sochu. Okay, so it's diluted. What you have here today, the first one, oh wait, sorry, it's in my hand. Okay, this is the Satsuma Shiranami. It does have the GI, all right. You can see here, under ingredients, Kogane Sangan is used, so it's a specific sweet potato from Kagoshima, and they use rice koji instead of sweet potato koji. So I mentioned distillation is something we want to look at. Normal pressure distillation gives you a bit of a slightly richer flavor. And koji, white koji, or what we often call Shiro koji. Okay? Shiro koji is used a lot nowadays in sochu production because aside from the flavors, which is usually a bit more lighter, citrusy, the other reason is also for the brewers. When you use white koji, your clothes are clean. When you use black koji, you turn very dirty. So they also don't want that. Yeah, so we use a lot of that more. And then, of course, serving suggestion, mix with water, mizuwari. Mix with hot water, oyuwari, on the rocks or straight. This is provided by the brewery. What you have with you today is, it's a form of mizuwari, mixing with water, but what I did was, this is diluted 24 hours ago. I came here on Sunday to dilute this. It's what we call maewari, pre-dilution. It's the same, we use the water, it's the same percentage, but with maewari, thank you, with maewari, it actually, that additional time allows the water molecules and the shochu to actually blend better. It does come out smoother. What I've used this time to do the maewari for you is also a little different. What I have used is a mino pot, which is a pottery, a mino pottery that actually is more porous, so that it lets more oxidation in that sense. So it smoothens out the flavor much faster. This is something that we often use for maewari, either the pot or sometimes you do find sochu dispensers, which are also pottery. So it lets the air comes in a bit better. Maewari actually is something that we do at home, particularly for your spouse. Or, you know, if you invite friends over, it actually shows additional, like, you know, the Japanese, that you're especially prepared for them, you know, your sincerity. It also sometimes the izakayas would do it the bars and izakayas would do it as well. It does make a difference. It doesn't have to be 24 hours. It can be more. It can be longer. It can even be kept for a couple of weeks. Flavors goes off, just put a drop of sochu, the same sochu in, the flavors will be lifted immediately. Yeah, so that's one. Of course, don't worry if you don't have the pot. All you need is a bottle, a clean bottle, or even the sochu bottle itself. So sometimes what I do, right, I finish half a bottle, however way I drink it, and then after that I just fill it up with water. That becomes my maewari. Maewari, I can throw it in the fridge. Sochu, do not store in the fridge. Never ever store it cold. Yeah, okay, just remember that. All right, so, wow, not bad. After I say already, you all haven't actually started drinking. So tasting, I started, okay, I already drank 3 before I came in already. So with this one, very, very obvious sweet potato. In fact, baked sweet potato, a bit like, you know, you pass by Don Donkey, you smell that one. Plus, this is done, this is a very traditional style, which to the Japanese, it's actually a bit more stinky. So what do they consider more stinky? You may be able to detect, right? It's almost like you can smell the skin of the earthiness, that skin of the sweet potato. That's the stinkiness or the chow chow that it's found in very traditional imo sochu styles. Yeah. This is a white koji. It's already less prominent. If you're going to have a black koji, that flavor would be even stronger, even richer. All right? So that is, so very sweet potato. Oh, I do have one here. That's my fourth one. No, I'm kidding. So there's also a bit of citrusy to this. The citrus notes, where's that? That actually is from the koji. So you can identify koji, and because it's normal pressure, it's not extremely light. There is still some body to this. So this works very well being a little bit more diluted. Hence water works great in a cocktail as well. Yeah. Okay, so let's move to the next one, which I know you've already gotten. The next one is rice sochu, kome sochu, and kuma would be the GI. So what the rice that they use nowadays, mainly Japanese rice, but they could also use Thai rice. In fact, a lot of the koji, the rice that is used in the koji for sochu making is Thai rice, very, very often. Yeah. So rice sochu, as up there, you will always have a hint of sweetness, like if you're eating rice, steamed rice, Japanese steamed rice. We always get that. And again, depending on distillation, it could be light, it could be a bit stronger, more powerful. And some rice sochu, if the rice has been polished finer or polished more, like in sake, the rice sochu can actually end up getting that, what we call the ginjo characteristics as well. Yeah. Okay. So this is Shiro, and it's actually a very light one. As you see, it's only diluted with a single cube of ice, followed by the sochu, which also means this dilution is more than the standard 60-40. Yeah, it's more sochu because this is very, very light. So as you can see, rice. This one uses Japanese rice koji, vacuum distillation. I'm sure Sean has mentioned earlier already. Vacuum distillation, or what we call genatsu, usually gives you something a lot lighter. And with Shiro, again, we're getting the citrus. So, in terms of the flavors, do you detect steamed rice? Like, you know, if you cook rice, right, whether it's like steam the rice cooker or if you're steaming your rice in the pot, the minute you lift it, that rice, yeah? But if you go take a slightly, smell it again, we can actually detect a hint of vanilla almost. Vanilla cream at the back, yeah? And also a bit of citrus zest, yeah? So what does all, okay, I'm a foodie, like you see my size, you know I eat a lot, right? What does that remind me of? A Portuguese rice pudding. Exactly, steamed rice, vanilla, cream, lemon. So this is what it is. The minute, it's not as obvious when we take it neat. Once we put the cube of ice in there, it opens up. Then you pick up the flavors. Okay. Oh, I just realized there's also food suggestion pairings. Well, imagine if this is steamed rice, the best thing is whatever that works well with rice, right? Anything that will, whether it's, oh, by the way, in general, regardless of what sochu you're drinking, it pairs best with our zicha. Serious? It pairs best with our zicha. All right, so next one, barley. I see that barley has come out. Again, served with 1 cube of ice. Sergio very generous with the sochu, huh? He's very generous with the sochu. Ah, okay. So you heard him say dareyame? Dareyame is a Kyushu dialect term, which actually means get rid of fatigue. So you know us, right? We say, let's go happy hour after work or even before, right? We say, let's go happy hour. If you're in Kyushu, a lot of them will just go dareyame. It simply means let's go and drink. And because in Japan, in the izakayas, especially for the salary men, more often than not, they drink shochu rather than others. It actually dareyame actually is linked to very closely to shochu. Okay, so now barley, as I mentioned, barley more often than not, koji is rice koji because if you imagine the kernel of barley, it's very hard to inoculate the koji. Okay, there are very few who does it. Again, it gives you a much stronger barley flavor. So barley, one characteristic of barley is that we often get a certain toastiness to it. If you taste this one, that toastiness is very light. Why? Because first, again, reduce. Oh, sorry, is someone taking a photo? Sorry, Dino. Hi, say. Oh, you all don't have written notes. Okay. I thought they had like a deck. That's why I don't read off the slide. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So this is Ginza no Suzume. Basically, Ginza's Suzume is machu, sparrow. Okay. So this is a very light but typical Oita barley character style. Okay. Very straightforward. This one actually uses barley koji, the few that does barley koji. Normal pressure distillation, but it is also blended with some that's vacuum. And the percentage of vacuum is a bit higher. Yeah, so that's why it's much lighter, much more elegant actually. And again, Shiro koji. Now, if for mugi or for barley shochu, the pressure during distillation makes a very, very big difference to the flavor. If it's normal pressure distillation, we get a lot of toastiness, like almost like sesame, like toasted sesame, that kind of toastiness, if it's normal. So this one only has a hint because it's a blend, so there's only a little bit. And in terms of the flavors for this one, if you have tried it, we're getting barley, almost like boiled barley. You know, you boil the barley drink? Yeah, that kind of boiled barley. Very light, very delicate boiled barley. But at the same time, there's a hint of toastiness. So it comes together, again, you know, it's almost like toasted bread. Like, you know, correct. And specifically what comes to mind is kilini kopitiam. You know, the kaya toast, because it's not like toasted till crisp, right? It's still fluffy. You cannot influence by me, is it? The description. Fluff, but there is lah. There's a bit of creaminess at the back, yeah. So that fluffiness, that quite fluffy toast, but still with that very light browning, yeah. That's how this one is, yeah. So we have this one. Again, I mean, good with a lot of like rice-based food, but imagine this would actually go quite well with a sandwich, you know. It's possible it's from the water actually. That could be because of the water, yeah. I mean, this is, for Oita, it's water from the mountains, so it's very likely that minerality that you detect is coming from there. Okay, and so with that, almost. Okay, I'm looking at them because they are, so this one you would see that the serving suggestion is quite straightforward. It's either on the rocks or straight. Why? Because this particular brand what they are trying to achieve is something that's very elegant, something that's very straightforward. You drink straight. If you need a cube of ice. It's a style that they're trying to go. And I think with Shochu nowadays, we see this kind of easier drinking style, lighter style, in fact, more aromatic style. It's becoming more and more popular, more and more prevalent. For those of you who may or, who drink some Shochu, maybe you may be familiar with like Dayame, very lychee forward. Yeah, I see a few hot heads nodding. Cedric brought back one recently from Japan, Muscat. It's an emo Shochu, but it's Muscat. And then there was one what? Banana.
So it's
Also sweet potato Shochu.
but different koji. The banana one is white koji. The muscat one is black koji.
Yeah. So they play with koji and all to bring out the different aromatics, and we are seeing this becoming more and more prevalent. Yeah, because that kind of hopefully attracts the younger generation in, and also that, it can be used more in like cocktails and things like that when it's more aromatic and not just your standard base ingredient. Okay? And yep, so the I've already lost count. What number is this? 4, thank you. The fourth one is brown sugar or Kokuto Shochu, most famous coming from Amami Islands in Kagoshima. Kagoshima is also famous for its Wagyu. And so, as you can see, the GI, to be a Amami Kokuto Shochu, it has to be processed, distilled, and bottled in Amami Islands. Brown sugar, you will always get very distinct, either brown sugar, molasses, sugar cane kind of flavors. Then it can be either light and refreshing or a bit heavier and rich. And this is because of the aroma, you actually end up smelling, thinking that it's sweet. But there's no sugar in Shochu. Yeah, but you think that it's sweet. All right, so the one that we're having today is Lentil. Yeah. Interestingly, it's 24% instead of the standard 25 or 20. Yeah. Black sugar, so rice, koji, vacuum distillation. So again, it's very light. If you have tasted this straight, it is very, very light. What we've done this a little bit is to do what we call soda wari, mixed with soda water, but because it's the flavors are fairly light, yeah, we actually get we don't really get the brown sugar, yeah, or the gula melaka kind of richness. We actually get a bit more molasses, so unrefined brown sugar. Slight tropical fruits at the back. And there is actually a muskiness. I'm not sure whether you all detect that muskiness. So a bit like, your unprocessed molasses kind of thing. So that's why we, for this one, what we did is to dilute it with soda wari, which is very common nowadays, to kind of lift the flavors. And also if you are like inside got a bit dirty, yeah? That's umeboshi. Yeah. So in Japan, it is very often that when people drink Shochu, one of the snacks that they have is umeboshi. They could just pick it up, take a small bite, as they drink, or sometimes they mix it into the Shochu, like what we did, and that kind of lifts your flavors a bit. Yeah, that acidity kind of lifts it up a bit. Otherwise, it can be a bit too straightforward in that sense. Okay. I see serving suggestion, and food pairing is left blank. So serving suggestions, like we did for you today, soda wari. It will also be good on ice. Yeah, because of its lightness, I would not really recommend mizuwari with water unless you are looking for a very, very light drink that day. Yeah. And food pairing, this could go with anything. Because of the ume in there, you could even go as much as our tami, bachomi kind of thing. Yeah, or even let's say, Sichuan food or mala. These will all go quite well.
So
Yeah.
the perception of sweetness usually is used to curb any form of spice.
Correct.
Although
Yeah.
there is no sugar inside it, but usually that helps as a complementary.
Yeah. Okay, so the last one today is, no, the last one, second last, sorry. It's buckwheat soba shochu. So soba is like the noodle soba. You literally get that. Buckwheat is a very hard grain. Yeah. It's like if you're trying to cook buckwheat, it takes a lot of effort. Yeah. So buckwheat, it gives you, there's some sweetness, usually gives you a depth in the flavor and also toastiness. Okay, so today what we are doing, we're serving to you is oyuwari with hot water. All right, so that helps to bring out that richness, that toastiness of the buckwheat. When we dilute shochu, I'm not going to talk about like if you use it for cocktails, but just simple dilution. We always put the mixer or the ice first, or the hot water first, then the shochu. If you're talking about water and ice, not as critical. But if we are talking about diluting with hot water, then it must be water first, then pour in your shochu. And the way we would do it is, just give me a minute. Sorry, I'm going to take a glass. Sorry. So imagine like what we have served you. We'll put the hot water first, and when we pour the shochu, okay, it's a bit hard to pour in a wine glass, but on a straight glass, a rock glass, etc. We'll pour the hot water, and then when we pour the shochu for hot water dilution, let the shochu kind of trickle down the side of the glass or the cup. And then as it reaches and you're pouring more and more, and for that last shot, that last bit, just jerk it up. So to create a bit of agitation in the water, that would give you the best oyuwari. And also, it does not spoil the shochu. If you pour shochu and then pour hot water in, it will actually burn the shochu. It could burn the shochu. And for shochu, keep your temperature, the hottest temperature to about 65, 70 max. All right, so don't go any higher. It will burn your shochu.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So with this one, the flavors of this soba, actually this is one that I really like, and
it's quite complex in terms of.
yeah, I really like this. I'm very long, very very long finish. I was like asking Sydney, hey, where y'all buy this? Yeah. Okay. So, what we're getting for this is very popcorn.
Yeah.
Do you all get popcorn? Like I can imagine watching movie drinking this and eating popcorn. Or probably a very good pairing would be Mexican food. The use of all the corn, your tortillas, your corn chips, your nachos and all. This would go excellent, very, very well. So the corn. Once we pour it into hot water, the flavors actually opens up. So aside from the corn, it actually starts to pick up black bean. You know, I don't know how many of you like boil soup or like drink, like soup, the black bean. And then like imagine if you like add some bones, pork bones or chicken feet, and then like
We need to try your soup someday.
lotus soup, like lotus root. That kind of a feel. It's a bit more brothy in that sense for this one. Yeah. And what is interesting to me is that this is actually it's still achieved using white koji. It is still white koji. Yet it's giving me that kind of depth and complexity in its flavors. If this were black koji, I think the flavors would be even richer and toastier. Yep. So yes, definitely very good for rich dishes. And also, as I mentioned, try it with Mexican food try it with, try it with popcorn even. Mushroom will
Yeah.
go.
There is a umami. Almost
Yes, there is a
toasty
umami to
kind
this.
of
That's
thing.
why I said it's brothy.
Yeah.
That's why it reminds us of boiled soup.
Yeah.
Lentils from the buckwheat itself? Yeah.
I would love this with yakitori actually. Yeah, with the skewers.
Yeah. All right. So that's the Towari soba, Zenryo. Everything that they've tried is available in Singapore, right?
I can't remember whether this one we bought it overseas or
It's
not.
here. I asked
It's here?
Sydney.
You found- okay. The last one I'm not sure whether
Okay.
again.
Last
it
one
was
should be here.
also here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think everything is in Singapore. If you enjoy it, you can find it here.
Okay.
All right, so the last one, this is an interesting one in that sense. It's Shisho, Tantakatang Shisho Shochu. And this one, it's of course using one of the 55 approved base ingredients, but a little bit not so common now, all right? So it's diluted to 20%, so it's actually quite light. The other thing that this is a blended sochu, as you can see. The blend of sochu is actually, did you bring up Kori?
No.
No. Okay, then I'll just very briefly. So we're talking about.
Kori as in continuous still.
Yeah.
Yes, I did bring it briefly.
Okay,
about
so
it,
very
yes.
brief. Yeah, because continuous Kori is not Honkaku Sochu. Today we are talking about Honkaku Sochu, which is the one in single distillation, pot still, etc. But this blend for this Sochu is actually a blend of Honkaku Sochu that we've all been talking about for the whole of today, and what we call Kori, which is the continuous distillation. Continuous distillation actually achieves more of like almost a neutral spirit, very, very light. So this is a blend, extremely light, but the Shisho character is actually quite strong in this one. Again, Shirokoji, what we have done is, you see the color very odd, right? We actually did ochawari. Okay,
Ochawari.
simply said, it's called ochawari. Ocha means tea lah.
Tea.
Blended, diluted with tea. But specifically, we diluted with cold brew green tea. That's why you don't have the astringency, you don't have the siap behind. Okay, and actually, we were also told in Japan that to dilute with green tea is ryokucha wari. So it's literally green tea dilution, okay? Don't worry, all this terminology, just go there, I want to mix with this, that works. So why did we do that? If you have tasted it, aside from picking up that light green tea fragrance, right? Because this sake, this sochu, I'm always talking about sake. This sochu, even though I drink a lot of sochu, this sochu, when we tasted it neat, the first thing that came to my mind is actually a Taiwanese thing called Suzume, which is Shisho Ume. Okay, it is a Taiwanese one. We don't find it in Japan. But basically, if we split the flavors, it's Shisho and Umeboshi. It was very, very strong. There's umeboshi. And there is umami at the back, in the tail of this sochu, which is very, wakame, that seaweed that we find in like miso soup and things like that.
Yes.
Very, very distinct. So because in like, why we mixed it with green tea, it lifts that, it actually lightens it, then it comes together very nicely. One of the so-called inspiration that came, for me at least, was because my first impression of this sochu was the Shisho Ume, Suzume. And in Taiwan, Suzume is a snack for tea. So that's why we decided to dilute it this way for you to try. Yeah. And yeah, of course, and then you get to try, dilution with something that's not water. Okay. So I think I have come to the end.
So the next segment actually what we're gonna do is that, I mean, thank you, Olivia, for such a insightful.
I just remembered something.
Yes, yes.
The food
please.
came out.
Yes.
and totally didn't say anything about it. I
No
think
worries, no worries.
Cindy
I
told me
think-
I have to talk about food, but
I think they can do a bit of.
you do your own tasting. I think I just
yeah,
want to
experimental.
highlight one item, which is next to your bakwa, that few brown slices there. It's called iburigako. Iburigako is a Akita specialty. It's actually also a registered GI, the 79th GI in Japan. It is a pickled smoked radish. And the only Akita does it. And the reason they do it is because it's so cold, all the radish will like dry up and like will get spoiled over winter. So what they do is they harvest the radish. In the old days, they used to dry and smoke it at home over the hearth. So like their charcoal fire, and that's why it got smoky. Then after that, they pickle it. So that is a very quintessential snack, otsumami. And you also see cream cheese next to it. I'm not sure whether they have blended it for you. No? Okay. What you can do is taste your iburigako with the cream cheese, because that's what a lot of the izakayas will do in Japan. Yeah? I think this one will go very well with your buckwheat, shochu, and the imo. Those two will be very, it might overpower the rice and the barley. Yeah? All right, thank you.
Yeah. So in terms of food pairing, actually, these are just a couple of. Anyway, thanks Olivia for the
Right,
for the very insightful
Bye.
talk and sharing on certain things like
No
how would
worries.
you
My
serve
friend.
shochu traditionally or even in more modern times. The pairing part is really more of a self-exploratory experience. These here are some suggestions that we have, and based on your current understanding of certain profiles of the flavors that you're getting from the shochu, or after certain dilution, you could actually use these as a form of guide in terms of how you would like to pair with your shochu. Because personally, I also have a couple of preferences. I would say I won't say it's a norm, but it's preferences that I would use certain shochus for certain form of pairing. So this is just a guide, and again, you could use this with the current bites that you have to see if it works for you. With that, do you have any questions for us? Yes.
Also, the market is many soju selling in package.
Package, yes.
Yeah, and selling in bottle. Does it affect the taste?
Does it affect the taste? I would say no, but in general, you wouldn't want to keep your shochu in a package for too long. Yeah. So, for example, that kind of tetra pack, you might want to move it a lot faster because it's not meant for long-term storage. Yeah. I think that's probably my only suggestion. It's the same for sake. I mean, you have seen sake in tetra pack, right? You probably don't want to keep it for too long.
Soju in package like 1.8 for a paper pack. Like or those like is it cheap only chips soju only selling in package.
Okay, so I think this is something that I probably also need to clarify. Now, when it comes to the tetra pack, it does not necessarily mean that it's cheap.
No.
Yeah. You also have to understand that when it comes to production, certain distilleries have the ability to churn out a huge amount of volume and be able to, and that kind of volume will be slightly more economical to produce in a petrol
Or
pack.
more cost effective lah.
Yeah. Plus, it's more carbon friendly.
More.
When we talk about carbon friendly, because bottles tend to have a bigger carbon footprint, right, based on logistics. So ideally speaking, actually that's a good it's actually a good initiative. But because of the perception that it's in tetra pack, right, it might not be. Yeah. It's kind of like you drink wines out of screw cap. It's the same notion. People always have this impression that screw cap is it's more entry level, but it's not true. Yeah. Yes, Karen.
So when we go for high bowl in like restaurants or bars, is there a fixed ratio for high bowls? Like
according to what?
As with all bars, right? Sometimes they give you, some bars will give you a bit more alcohol. But standard is 60-40.
Okay, thank you.
Usually 60. Yes.
Is shochu always fermented in dryness, or is there sometimes a bit of residual sugar in it?
Okay, that's also a good question. Now, as far as I understand in terms of spirits, right, in general, it's always dry because it's new mix are usually dry, colors. Usually dry and colorless. So I would say no residual sugar unless you add.
So it's legal to add.
No, actually. No, it depends. If you're using it for base, if you're doing a base spirit, like for example, meishu or yuzushu, with distilled shochu, most of the time you use Korea instead. You use the column stick. You wouldn't use Okaki shochu. It's a bit too expensive to use it as a base. That's probably also my call to end the session. So again, once again, I thank all of you for your attention. You guys have been great. Please enjoy your cocktails. If you have any questions, we'll still be here. If you want to move on to something else, like beer, that's also fine. We have a beer on tap. So again, thank you all for your time. I will see you next.